Where did your interest start in politics?
So I think I've always been political in the sense that coming from Liverpool, sort of being a city with a legacy of sort of left-wing politics and political activism, I've always had an interest in sort of my own city, my own local area, and then sort of the politics, the attitude towards Scousers and whatnot. Then that sort of, as I got older, became more of an interest in sort of injustice and those sort of themes, and poverty and inequality. And then as I got older, when I was in secondary school, this converted itself more into an interest in sort of the theory of politics, the study of politics. So I did politics at A-level, and then it was something that I was really interested in, so then did it in my degree. So now I'm more interested in sort of political theory and the history of political thought. So not so much sort of like current sort of political debates or anything like that. I'm more interested in sort of why does society function the way that it does, and what can we do, or what might we need to do in order to make that society better. And for me, that's the point of politics, is making society better for everybody to live collaboratively in, rather than just thinking about sort of like who's better, Keir Starmer or whoever the Tory candidate is, Rishi Sunak or whatever.
Where have you studied and what have you studied?
So I did my degree at University College in the University of Oxford, and I did philosophy, politics and economics, where I then studied, after the first year you can drop down to 2 subjects or carry on with all 3. So after the first year I dropped economics and did politics and philosophy at uni, and next year I'm going to do a master's at the University of York in political theory.
What careers do students go on to achieve when they leave university after studying politics?
So it really depends on the student, on what they want to do, and so on and so forth. So if I think about, for example, my friends who study politics, there are a couple who work for the government. So I have one friend who's an economist in the Foreign Office. He works for the Civil Service. Got another friend who is a project manager for a biomedical science company. I've got another friend who's a management consultant. I'm in education. So really, it depends on the student and the career. The most important thing is that students have a degree in something that they're really interested in, and then are able to use their knowledge and skills to find something that they like and apply themselves to that.
How did you progress into your current job?
So it's a bit of a long anecdote, but I've been working in university access work for a couple of years now, particularly as a student ambassador when I was at uni, and I attended an event in Liverpool called Aspire, and one of my colleagues was there. We got on really well, and then he mentioned that there might be a job available later on in the year. So my friend saw a post on LinkedIn, sent it to me, and I got in contact with him. It turns out that he was the coordinator of Oxnet, which is the Oxford Access programme that I also work for. And I had an interview with him and the Access Fellow of Pembroke College, who then recommended me to SLT here for the job, and then I was sort of given the job. But generally speaking, I progressed just by sort of following my nose in access work, and the opportunity just arose to do this job.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
So I like to think that I'll be started on sort of a successful career. I'd like to have emigrated by then. I don't particularly want to stay in the UK for too long. So hopefully emigrated, living in Spain or something, or maybe Germany, doing a job, probably something corporate like consulting or something like that. But that's probably where I see myself in 5 years.
What are your passions other than politics?
So one of my main passions is football. I love watching football, even though it can be quite difficult at times being an Everton fan, because we're not very good. I'm particularly passionate about women's football. I love watching Everton women and England in particular. I'm looking forward to the World Cup this summer. I also play football for a local grassroots team called Aggregate, and they are a really cool group of women, and yeah, I enjoy playing football, watching football, anything to do with football, especially when it includes going to the pub at the end.
Who is your favourite politician?
It's quite difficult because I'm not necessarily, I'm a bit disillusioned from electoral politics at the minute, mainly because I don't think any of the political parties represent my political views. I think that's quite sad, in that it feels as if the Labour Party has moved to the right, and as has the Conservative Party, which is quite damning for the state of socialism in the country. But I still really do admire Jeremy Corbyn. I know there was sort of a bit of a sour taste when he was forced to step down due to sort of the anti-Semitism scandal, but the thing that I admire about Corbyn was how sort of he presented his vision for politics. That was a vision that politically aligns with my views, but also he placed sort of compassion and empathy at the front and centre of his politics, which I think we could all learn a bit from. I also really admire how he managed to mobilise and encourage a lot of young people to get interested in politics, many of whom had felt disillusioned by politics previously. So for that reason I'd probably say Jeremy Corbyn.
How do you stay up to date with current political events and developments?
So for my sins, I spend too much time on Twitter and Instagram, so social media mainly. I follow quite a lot of commentators who are interested in the same sort of things as me. I tend not to use mainstream news purely because I can't really be bothered, particularly with dealing with a lot of like transphobic vitriol that tends to be front and centre of mainstream news. I really like podcasts, and I really like Novara Media, which is sort of a left-wing news organisation, and I really enjoy their content and their videos and their articles. So mostly online, and if not through social media, then through Novara.
Can you discuss any extracurricular activities you've been involved in to promote political awareness among students?
So do you mean like in my current role?
Yeah.
So in my first year, I ran, and in my second year as well, I ran a couple of reading groups. So I ran one on political philosophy, and I ran another one on feminist thought. So sort of introducing students to political theory. To me, it's really important to get students to have the tools to be able to figure out the answers to those questions themselves. And for me, a lot of the tools come from reading widely, engaging closely with source material and texts that are found within the canon of political theory and political philosophy. So I did that, and then also in my classes, which I think sort of links to the next question, I always run a session where I get students to write an essay on should we lower the voting age to 16, and encourage them to read a wide range of sources and figure out for themselves whether they should lower the voting age to 16 or not. We also then do a tutorial session, and in the tutorial there's sort of a seminar style discussion where students argue their own point of view with one another about whether the voting age should be reduced and whatnot.
I guess I'll still ask it, but can you discuss your approach towards teaching controversial and sensitive political topics?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things that may be construed as political topics that I believe to be sort of non-negotiables in terms of discussion. So for example, the right to abortion, I think, is sort of often construed as a political issue, whereas for me it's non-negotiable that, you know, if a woman or somebody who's pregnant would like to have an access to abortion, they should be able to do so regardless of the conditions in which they've found themselves like pregnant. So if I am discussing a topic such as abortion with my students, I tend to or if abortion is mentioned in something that I've given them to read, I tend to sort of set that as an expectation or a ground rule, because I think using the term political or freedom of speech can sometimes distort what is actually going on, which is that, well, sometimes you just shouldn't, as a matter of sort of good politics, you shouldn't say things that will intentionally damage or hurt other people, or you shouldn't platform views that would sort of cause unnecessary harm. So I try to sort of, limit debate on those types of issues. But generally, what I do is just encourage students to figure things out for themselves. So give them the tools to be able to sit down, have a reason, think and discussion about what is going on. I think one of the main issues in our society, I think even thinking back to me as a 16, 17-year-old, is that we're quite hot-headed as people. We spend a lot of time online. We spend a lot of time sort of ingesting information via short sound bites, whether it be TikToks or tweets or Instagram posts, which means that we don't necessarily have the time to sit down and think and reason. So I like to try and encourage students, or give them the time and the space to sit down and think and reason by reading, by thinking, by discussing with one another, in order to give them the tools to then be able to understand controversial or sensitive political topics that can often be quite difficult to sort of wade through and get to the core of the idea of what's going on.
I pretty much discussed the next question. So, do you have any advice for students interested in studying politics? Yeah,
so I think find what you're interested in and follow your passion and what you're interested in. Sort of remember that politics isn't just a theory. It's neither just a theory or a matter of practice. It's about thinking about how the two interact with one another. So I'd say get involved with sort of local political issues, local political activism, see what's happening on the ground, see how grassroots political movements work, and so on. I'd also say read widely, engage as long as you sort of feel there's a need to engage with them. Some issues I just think there's no point in engaging with, but engage with views that you find different to yours or you find challenging, and spend time thinking, reading, discussing with your friends and your peers about what's going on around you, because you need to raise your consciousness yourself. You need to put the effort in yourself to then be able to understand and take a lot from the world of politics.